Dear First Deputy Prime Minister, Minister, First Deputy Excellencies, Generals, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to warmly welcome you all to the 13th Annual National Security Conference. Our security cannot be taken for granted. We established this conference in 2014 on the occasion of the 15th anniversary of the Czech Republic's accession to NATO, which gave the Czech Republic its highest security guarantees in history based on transatlantic ties. And therefore, I'm glad that we are meeting here again in early March. And once again, I can see this ballroom of the Prague Castle full. This year, the interest was higher than the capacity, so we apologize for your understanding if we could not accommodate your interest and invite you here in person. Since this conference was established, it has the same concept. It's a national platform based on interaction between top-notch experts and politicians, because in order to address current security issues, you need both experts as well as politicians who make the respective decisions. And therefore, we appreciate the patronage of the Prime Minister. And now I will quote, "I very much appreciate this traditional conference, which creates space for political discussion on key issues of security and defense of the Czech Republic. I very much appreciate the fact that the conference contributes to open dialogue between politicians, experts, and representatives of the security and armed forces," unquote. So this was a quote from the Prime Minister's letter. This conference has become a prestigious platform over the years. And this year, we are continuing the tradition of inviting the representatives of the new government who will now introduce their views on the Czech Republic's foreign policy and security and defense issues. And I'm glad that the new National Security Advisor will be making his appearance here. Since its inception in 2014, the Security Conference is taking place just a few days after a major international crisis has broken out, which is a testament to the current turbulent environment in which we find ourselves. And again, it proves that our security cannot be taken for granted. First, we will hear from the major representatives of the government, and then we will address several expert topics. The dynamic transformation of the security environment is generating demand for ever more modern technologies and financial resources. In the first expert panel, we will focus on top Czech defense technologies, and we will discuss how to keep them at a world-class level, and also how to finance them through Czech venture investment funds. Then we will continue with a topic that we perceive as increasingly relevant, and we include it every year. And this year it's even more important because it focuses on interconnecting our external and internal security. We very much appreciate that a large number of the top officials led by the President are participating in the conference, and the President's keynote speech will open the second part of the 13th annual conference. He will be speaking here as Commander-in-Chief. And our afternoon session will include the Ambassador of the United States, His Excellency Nicholas Merrick, who will be speaking here in the afternoon. One of our long-term goals is to strive for and support the establishment of a domestic consensus in the area of security issues. And therefore, we are very much pleased that our traditional political panel will close this conference. It will feature senior representatives of political parties and movements from the Chamber of Deputies in its new composition following last autumn's election. Commission. Thank you. I would like to extend my gratitude to President Petr Pavel for his patronage, also Prime Minister Andrej Babiš, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Petr Matsinka, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense Jaromír Zůna, and Minister of the Interior Lubomír Metnar. I would also like to acknowledge the continuous support for the conference from the Ministry of Defense. I would also like to thank for the continuous support for the conference from the defense industry, both contractors and the Czech domestic defense industry, because in today's situation, it is of key importance to have strong domestic defense capabilities. And it is great to see that the Czech Republic, that the Czech company CSG has become a global player, and that two companies from Slovácko, Česká zbrojovka and Zaveta Ammunition, are celebrating their 19th anniversary this year. They were established in the 1930s by the Czechoslovak government amidst the dramatically deteriorating security environment in order to make our defense industry as strong as possible. Therefore, please allow me, by way of conclusion, to thank all the partners without which we would not be able to organize today's conference. So general partner Czechoslovak Group, also and Tatra Trucks, also Ministry of Defense, and the main partners, BAE Systems, Colt CZ Group, Česká zbrojovka, Lockheed Martin, and Zaveta Ammunition. The conference was also supported by partners Aerovodochody and Omnipol Group. And this conference will be closed by our glass of wine, supported by Ray Service. And we would also like to thank American Friends of the Czech Republic and Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for their support. The media partner of the conference are NATO Aktuál, CZ, and CZ Defense. And by this, I would close my speech, and I would like to ask Karel Havlíček, First Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Industry and Trade of the Czech Republic, to take to the stage.
Vážený pane ministře,
Dear Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, we would perhaps all agree that with respect to security, we are right now going through one of the most difficult period of times in the past decade. And it's not only due to the fact what is going on in the past or has been going on in the past month, but we have to look at it from the point of view of what we have experienced in the 6 to 7 years. Pandemic, energy crisis, then several conflicts in Ukraine, in the Gaza Strip, right now in Middle East, and we cannot underestimate the situation between China and Taiwan, then a big question mark in Afghanistan, and we can go on and on. To a large extent, these facts have impacted relationships in the world, also on the economic level. Simply speaking, relationships based on relations transformed into transactional relations, and we have to perceive it like that and adapt to that. Also, superpowers are getting stronger and stronger. We see the Russia being aggressive and expanding. We see strengthening of China. And we can only face it by strengthening other superpowers, the USA and then Europe. And our duty is to participate and actively be involved in it. When talking about the security conflicts, Ukraine, Gaza, and Middle East, despite big discrepancies in the political sense, I think that these are issues that we all agree about. We have all condemn the Russian aggression. We have clearly supported Israel within the conflict in Gaza, and it's good that we have presented quite clear position with respect to Middle East and the conflict there, unlike some of the countries, including countries of the EU. This is the break point. This is the situation that we cannot put our head into sand. We cannot get provoked, whether it's legal or legitimate. It's necessary, because if Iran actually completes its nuclear program and the regime headed by a single person has nuclear missiles, then we will only talk about what we could have done in order to stop a huge problem for the whole planet. So I firmly believe that all the countries that are allies should strongly support the US and Israel, similarly to what we did. And to take a clear position, we need to support the US and strengthen US and Europe and strengthen cooperation between US and Europe, both at the level of security cooperation, but also economic, political, energy, and raw material level. We have to admit that the virtual fight that was created or established about 15 years ago, when our ambition was to catch up with the US, meant that we underestimated the situation. The US is not an enemy. The US are our ally, and we have to look at it from a different perspective. But strengthening the security, which is the topic of today's conference, needs to be based on several pillars. And what is important, it needs to be balanced. We could discuss what could even be better, but we will definitely agree that it has to be based on a defense pillar. It's about our alliance within NATO. I have said several times at this conference that the most important milestone for the Czech Republic was to become a member of the NATO. But I have also repeatedly said at this conference that it has to go hand in hand with the strengthening of the relationships with the US. It's all about the discussion about meeting our duties and obligations. Right now, we need to fulfill at least 2% of GDP, and we actually put plus 14 billion crowns into defense spending. So you could say that it could be better, you are right, but we have to find the balance when we talk about other steps in terms of strengthening of our security. When we talk about internal security, it's based on the fact that we need to maintain the condition of the Czech Republic so that it's not under threat of major migration flows. And actually today, during this difficult situation in the Middle East, those countries that were able to curb the migration in the previous years are in a better position. And we can ask a question why some countries with a larger proportion of migrants actually use, I believe, two diplomatic statements. So internal security based on the thing that we have to curb migration from third countries, but also there is also a threat of migration of Ukrainian veterans after the conflict in Ukraine is finished. And we are talking about tens of thousands of people, and we should be prepared for that. And I think that the internal security is going to play a major role compared to external security. And we have to actually work on that. And staffing is important, and we have to pay the personnel and also motivate them, and that means more spending. The next area, energy energy security, as it is not given only by the geopolitical situation, but there is also price, availability and accessibility, diversification of resources, and also availability of resources, and it costs a lot of money. And if we look at the risks arising from interruption of supplies related to the threat of blackouts, we are talking about hundreds of billions of crowns that would need to be invested into networks, and it is a step in the direction of strengthening the internal security of the Czech Republic as well as of the whole of Europe. What is the reason for that? The change in the energy mix, but perhaps this is an ideological discussion, but it's another topic. But we will need to invest billions of Czech crowns into strengthening the energy infrastructure. So we need to find resources in the budget. Next, it's about security related to self-sufficiency in terms of raw materials, agriculture, food, etc. So all these things were underestimated just a couple of years ago. We thought that we shouldn't be, that we will have the clever, smart people in Europe and the rest will be imported into Europe. It is not a mistake to make a mistake. That happens. What is a mistake is not to admit it and not to change the behavior. What I really do not like is that often we are not able to admit that this is the reality. We have to admit that we made wrong decisions in the past and that we have to change it. It means that it will take us more time to improve the situation. So we as a Europe need to achieve a higher level of self-reliance. And all of that costs a lot of money. And we can ask whether we will actually invest money directly or indirectly. I think that we can also use some indirect mechanisms, loans, etc. What I want to say is that there is a huge pressure on public budgets, not only in the Czech Republic, but also in other countries. And smart government should not be provoked and pushed into corner just by a single issue. We need to strengthen the security in all these areas and support it in a balanced way. We just cannot allow it to go into only one direction. And of course, we need to consider the budgetary restraints. So let's support defense, energy security, independence in terms of industry, raw materials, agriculture produce. Let's strengthen the internal security and let's do it in a balanced way in all these areas. In the afternoon, we will have a panel where we will be able to discuss it even in more detail. So thank you very much for giving me the floor. Unfortunately, I'll have to leave right now, but I'll come back in the afternoon. Thank you for your attention.
Děkujeme panu prvnímu místopředsedovi vlády Karlu Havlíčkovi za jeho
Thank you, Karel Havlíček, First Deputy Prime Minister, for your opening remarks. Mr. First Deputy Prime Minister will be back. And now I would like to ask Jaromír Zůna, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense of the Czech Republic, to take to the stage. Well, I think I'm the only member of the government at this point. Dear senators, dear members of the Chamber of Deputies, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests. I'm pleased I have the opportunity to participate in this conference. Our security cannot be taken for granted, and be here in the position of a Minister of Defense. I would also like to thank Jagello and Mr. Pavlačík for the invitation. I would also like to thank the organizers and supporters for organizing this conference, which is a staple in our calendars. I'm convinced that we all, not only as citizens, but representatives of the defense and security community, can be proud of having such conference in the Czech Republic, especially if it's being held in such prestigious auspices and premises as these. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our servicemen and the entire Ministry of Defense who are contributing to the evacuation of Czech citizens from the Middle East. The Army of the Czech Republic is executing its tasks and does so in conditions that we never thought of in the past. It is only good when we look at the trends in the security environment and the threats that are emerging for the Czech Republic. In line with the Czech government's testamento and manifest, it is great that we have a functional government that can take care of its citizens, even in crisis and times of crisis. It's one of the main priorities of our government. When we look at the current conflict, it is clear how important air defense is. Strategic stockpiles of ammunition, functional system of warning of citizens, a system of resilient society, importance of security domains, and so on. These areas are also top priorities of the Czech Republic, and the current events show that these priorities were well chosen. Preparedness of air defense and ground defense is focused on defending key, important and strategic infrastructure. The costs, of course, are high. We have to find consensus in order to be able to earmark sufficient funds and invest them well. Therefore, we should not simplify the importance of building and enhancing our army. We should focus on practical interventions implemented in real time in order to react to the current needs of our security environment. This brings to mind one important text by Professor Matler, who talks about reflecting the reflection on the importance of transatlantic ties. She said back then, military is used more than in the times of Cold War, and it is used as Clausewitz's tool of policy. It is being used in cooperation with other tools in more countries. This was back in 2004. Now, with hindsight, we are witnesses of the escalation of new clashes worldwide. We can see that rivalry is pushing away cooperation. International norms and standards are being doubted and put into doubt, and we can see new threats to our security, stability. New vulnerabilities are emerging and new dependencies as well. The United States, at the same time, in line with its strategy, are taking steps to make sure Europe takes responsibility for its own security and security of the entire region. And this pushes NATO into adapting, and Europe as well, into adapting its policies to new realities. It wouldn't have to be this way if, for a long time, we looked at the main conservative schools of building capabilities, armies, and were not taken or did not believe false arguments and others. Therefore, now we have to look for new balances, and therefore it is so difficult and costs so much and has such political implications. That's the balance that Minister Havlíček talked about. The quality of strategies is always built on whether we can ask the right questions. I hope that we will be able to put the right questions into new concepts of the Ministry of Defense. The main question is how we should invest well into our army. When we look at 2014 to 2025, when the defense spending increased by 400%, how come that the battle readiness and effectiveness did not increase as well? Why are we not able to keep the pace of modernizing our army that we had in the first 5 years of professionalization of our army? There are many questions like that, many similar questions that I could ask. We were able to plan the building capacities of our heavy brigade, but when the budget increased to 160%, how come we delayed some other modernization efforts by several years? There are answers to these questions, but we have to look at the hard data. In this context, I remember a discussion between Margaret Thatcher and Mikhail Gorbachev. Mrs. Thatcher said, if the wealth of a country is based on the number of natural resources, Russia would be a paradise and Hong Kong would be just a poor village. But it's quite the contrary, because it depends on how we decide to live.
V podstatě my víme dlouhodobě, že potenciál čistě štátních procesů, tvorbě strategických dokumentů.
We know that when preparing strategic documents, we need to think twice, and therefore the language of our concepts is still more and more formal. NATO is a category of asymmetric alliances. We know that. We actually wrote several such textbooks here as well in the Czech Republic. Responsibility needs to be shifted more on European allies as well, so that we do not only depend on the US. We've been knowing that for quite some time. Therefore, we cannot hide behind false pretexts saying that we did not know about these major shifts and changes, and therefore we took wrong turns and made wrong decisions. And therefore, we are convinced that the solution is not so much change in our defense policies, but return to our real defense policies, to return to realpolitik of building defense capabilities of our nation, which will meet the following. Trustworthy army is one of the cornerstones of state sovereignty, defense and security of our citizens, and fulfillment of our international promises and obligations. Therefore, we need to have a professionalized army which will be able to protect the Czech Republic and contribute to collective defense of our allies. Of course, this will bear high costs. Therefore, we are revising and reviewing strategic documents and targets of our defense. We will focus on real needs of defending our airspace and the citizens of the Czech Republic. Our priorities include several goals, especially preparing for current as well as future threats, with more emphasis placed on internal threats as well. In terms of doctrine, we will focus on implementing modern trends in warfare and a systemic fulfillment of Article 3 of Washington Agreement. We will also modernize defense legislature so that it is in line with alliance requirements and current security environment. In terms of structural area, we need to prepare subsequent changes which will fulfill the needs vis-à-vis the changing security environment. And this will be one of the main demonstrations of transformation of the Ministry of Defense. This is also connected to the fact that our requirements and our other ties commitments will need to be reflected in the current changes. In the area of personnel, we will change the training of our army and armed forces and improve the training of our forces so that it is in line with the current requirements. This will also focus on better training of reservists as well as commanders and command. Without highly motivated personnel, the Czech Republic cannot fulfill its military ambitions and political ambitions. Modernization of armed forces will keep its continuity and pace in line with long-term plans. Modernization includes new systems of air defense, UAVs, strengthening ground forces and also air bases. We need to modernize our digital systems as well as infrastructure. Research and development will play a great role in this regard. Defense spending and funding will be focused on foreseeability, and one of the main conditions will be transfer to more flexible and effective implementation of important projects of armament with regard to new long-term plans of funding. We need to improve our legislation as well, which needs to be adapted to be in line with current threats and risks. Harmonization of crisis management will be implemented through national as well as international trainings and exercises. Our army and active reserves and general reserves need to create one integrated whole. Strategic planning in the area of defense will include long-term defense outlook until 2040 and a concept of building the Czech army until 2040. The funding of the army will be based on a national budget of at least 2% GDP spending, and it will reflect the current needs of the country. In 2026, a new unit will be created focused on efficient drawing of funds and reflecting new various tools such as NATO, ACIP capabilities, financial framework 2030 plus, and so on. Efficient strengthening of our capabilities and defense will support the interconnection of startup community, deep tech community, and defense community with our participation in Czech Hub and Diana Accelerator. We will create an experimental unit aimed at using dual applications. We very much welcome the use of dual-use technologies. In cooperation with the Technology Agency of the Czech Republic, the Ministry of Defense will extend its new PRODEF program, supporting new and breakthrough technologies. Foreign cooperation will be also very important in order to continue having good ties and relations with our allies and neighboring countries. We will focus on cooperation in traditional areas such as training, planning, logistics, crisis management, interoperability, and the fulfillment of our roles within NATO structures, as well as the highly topical area in army modernization. As I've mentioned many times before, our army, our economy and defense industry, and the extent of our defense and security has great potential, which will form the cornerstone of our further strengthening of our army and the security of our country. Let's try to tap into this potential and use it to the fullest. My aim will be to motivate people to achieve the plans of our vision, which we cannot maybe fulfill now because we miss the resources, but we might have them later on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention, and I hope that this year's conference will be a unique platform for our expert interaction, as well as a source of important information, and I hope it will be a success. Thank you for your attention.
Děkujeme.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, Jaromír Zůna, for a very detailed plan that he would like to implement while being the Minister of Defense. And as I said, this conference is focusing both on internal and external defense. I'm glad to invite Lukáš Klučka, the first Deputy Minister of the Interior of the Czech Republic, to take the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I would like to thank for inviting me to this conference and for the opportunity to give my speech here. Security threats are evolving, and this evolution is related not only to the global development, but also to the acceleration of technological advances. Crime and threats are increasingly shifting to the digital environment. Scam calls, fake investment platforms, stealing of identities, extortion via social media or data attacks. All of these are cases that the Czech police deal with on a daily basis. Similarly, and it is also a very important topic, is the polarization of the society, which today, unfortunately, is accelerating. The digital space brings opportunities, but also fundamental vulnerabilities, and the state must respond to this fact. However, it must respond in a way that it does not exacerbate these problems, and I'm talking mainly about the polarization of the society. One of our main priorities is to modernize the security forces. We want to invest in technology, in analytical tools, in data processing capabilities, and above all, and we've heard it today several times, in people and human capital. Today, crime often and quickly crosses borders, and it is a matter of just seconds. And that is why we need to keep very close relations with our foreign partners. The digitization of public administration is not just a matter of convenience, but it is mainly a tool for strengthening the security and efficiency of the state. Secure electronic identity, interconnected registers, fast and controlled data sharing among authorities, all of this enables the state to respond to external threats quicker. At the same time, we are fully aware that every new digital system must be developed with an emphasis on security from the outset, because resilience and also data protection is an absolute priority. A modern state must be digital, but above all, a digital state must be secure. The Ministry of the Interior also plays a clear role in crisis management. We must be prepared for emergencies, whether these are natural disasters, large-scale power outages, or cyber attacks. Today, states' resilience means the ability to respond quickly, to coordinate activities of different agencies and minimize impact on citizens. And this requires close cooperation on the state level, but also with the private sector, because many critical infrastructure elements are in the hands of private entities. And that is why we need to focus on such cooperation. Security does not begin at the moment of intervention. It begins with prevention, and that is true mainly for the online environment threats and digital threats. Public awareness is of key importance. We need to inform the public how to behave in the online environment, because many attacks are successful because perpetrators are able to exploit trust or ignorance of the digital environment. That's why we support projects focusing on digital literacy. We cooperate with school and the NGOs. A resilient society is the best foundation for a secure state. New forms of crime also require an appropriate legal framework. We are therefore working to make sure that legislation is able to respond to the development while remaining in balance with the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms, as security must not be used as an excuse to weaken the rule of law. On the contrary, a strong rule of law is a prerequisite for long-term security. We also advocate a strategic approach to risk management. We do not want to respond to a single incident. Our goal is to build a system that is resilient in the long run. Ladies and gentlemen, security is a process. It is our commitment, our joint effort. At the Ministry of the Interior, we consider it our duty to create a condition for the Czech Republic to be a safe, stable, and trustworthy state that is able to protect its citizens both in the physical and digital space. I would like to thank all members of the security forces, experts who are involved in these activities. And I would like to thank you for today's discussion, as it can contribute to even better preparation for these new challenges. Thank you very much for your attention.